Unfortunately, that intro won't be on the call. Andy Stumpf, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
We're recording.
Okay.
How's your new home? I'm not going to disclose the location, even though you post pictures of it every day on Instagram. But
I don't post pictures of the location though, and I've been hashtagging like Oklahoma and Tennessee. I'm throwing people off. They'll never figure it out.
Where is he now?
Yeah.
Everyone knows if they want me, then set up an ambush. It's at Nobu. Like it's just I fucked myself, didn't I?
Yeah, actually, yes. If I wanted to find you, if I sat there for a week straight,
hey, let's not get into detail. Let's not get into detail here. You'll get some stalker an idea. I posted something yesterday. This kind of really emotional experience I had over the weekend when Adrian showed me some videos, and like there's all these people on there like, hey, I had your original VHS tapes from the 80s and that was great and thank you for the memories. And then some fucker posts on there, no one is still interested, or it's like something like one of the haters. So I just deleted him. And
the internet is an interesting ecosystem that provides a voice to everybody. And in my opinion, not everybody should have a voice.
Dude, 100%. It's made people who absolutely have no critical thinking skills think they've got critical thinking skills, and they fucking spew their shit, and it's pretty annoying.
And on top of that, I think the biggest disconnect is that it's a consequence-free environment. Somehow it has removed. Like, people wouldn't say that to your face. And I have noticed on social media, I forget who I was talking to recently, but social media is neither media nor social. It's hard to determine what exactly, because you can just produce whatever you want to. It's hard to get to the bottom of things, but it's actually, I think it's removing people's social skills. They will say and type out and blurt out things that they would never do in an actual face-to-face setting. And I think that's dangerous, because if they live their real life thinking it's consequence-free, they're going to have some serious issues when they run into the wrong person.
This is fucking deep, dude. Like every so often, I think you're just some guy who jumps off mountains and flies around like a giant bird. But you also, you're a deep guy, and we've known each other a long time, and I'm always pleasantly reminded about that. That's heavy. Is there anything more you want to expand on that? I mean, how do we fix that? Or is it just like the pendulum has to swing? I wrote something the other day, like a week or two ago. I go, how much more productive and how much more would we personally evolve in interpersonal skills if suddenly there was no Facebook, no Instagram, there was no social media. Suddenly we actually had to write a letter or call somebody or walk to their house and go, hey man, I haven't heard from you. How you doing?
I think it would be definitely a step in the right direction. I personally don't have enough time in the social media pool to truly. I have a couple of years, and it was, I won't say it was forced on me, but it became, from the base jumping skydiving world. And if you want to have sponsors, there's obligations that are largely driven by posting pictures and stuff. So I wasn't that I was forced there, but since that was the route my life was taking, I ended up there, and I haven't really seen the growth. I kind of just jumped in cannonball style into the pool. So I don't know what the solution is, but I know that people who, your friends on Facebook, I don't know the vast majority of the people, and I don't see people talking in a friendly manner. And I think that we're more connected as a world and a society right now from a digital perspective, and more disconnected from a human being perspective than we've ever been. And I don't know, is the solution to flip the switch and turn it all off? I don't know. I think that might breed a little bit of chaos, which personally I would enjoy and laugh my ass off about.
Right.
But I don't know if that would, I don't know. I mean, I would say it would start with putting the devices away. Start with 30 minutes a day, just lock it away, then go to an hour. And then, focus and spend the time on your family. That's my theory. And less time on other people that you don't actually know. Your followers or friends, they're not really. You don't know these people. They're looking at pictures, and it's just go do your own shit as opposed to watching.
I've got like 9,000 really good friends on Facebook.
I'm sure you do. Yes, I'm sure that you do.
I know each one of them personally.
Yes.
No, those are great points. And it's almost like, ironically, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, it's like it's like eating properly and working out regularly and meditating and getting good at any skill set. You want to be a piano player. You recently got into bow hunting, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I know you're you're comfortable with weapons in your hands, so you probably picked it up faster than most other people. But there's you got to decide you want to get good at something, and you've got to train, and you got to work. But we can get into the bow hunting and other stuff a little bit later. Although I personally, I would rather hunt, you know, predators than animals for whatever reason. That's more of a political, emotional thing. But I love the advice. It's this consequence free. I mean, I love how you express that, because it's, you know, it's eloquent and elegant in its simplicity. A lot of times we just bitch or we go, come here and say that, motherfucker. You know, that's what you're thinking. And it's,
Yeah. I just always try to imagine being in an elevator and conducting yourself as if you're in that elevator, because these people who are spewing the most vitriol,
right,
they're not going to say it in that elevator. It's the same thing as when I drive my car and there's a 1/4 of an inch of glass between me and somebody else who cuts me off. I'm going to fucking kill you. Like,
right.
I don't know what it is. It's just that some level of detachment, even when it's a transparent piece of glass, allows you to flip this switch and become the person that you don't want to be and that you would never be face to face. I think the internet is just an exaggeration of that.
Definitely amplifying that bullshit. Well, maybe you should write some sort of etiquette guide and post it. It'd be like, don't be a dick. It was, you know, that would be one of them. Point 3, point 2.
There might only be 1 point though. That would be it. Like, don't be a dick.
Right. When
lost, see point 1.
Let me ask you a question. Because you always, and I hate that expression, not always, you regularly surprise me with the positions you take on major events in the world. And when I say surprise me, I don't mean like, oh, I can't believe like Andy opposes this. Like, but you have this, it's not even the devil's advocate. It's a very cerebral, philosophical position, whether it's on gun control, whether it's on active killers and stuff like that, where when something happens like the Florida shooting,
yep.
Take me through you kind of look at it. What makes you decide whether you're going to engage and write?
Well, for one, I miss writing, and I haven't been writing for a while. And I almost wrote something. I have actually like 1,500 words written on the Florida shooting, and I hesitated to hit post on it because it repeated a lot of the sentiments that I had expressed previously. And I don't know. I don't like reading the same stuff twice, so I assume other people wouldn't either. But the first thing I do when I see any incident like that at all is I take a knee. Not physically, but figuratively. And I try to take the time to actually gather as much information as possible and make up my own mind, as opposed to listening to what other people are saying. And when it comes to those environments, when you're talking about probably specifically gun violence or shootings or killing, for better or worse, I have more experience than almost every human being on the face of the planet when it comes to those things. And that's not saying I've done that a lot. That's saying that almost nobody ever has, which is a good thing. So I think I view it a little bit differently, and I understand how complicated and how nuanced the situations can be. I understand how little time that you have to make decisions. I understand what it looks like, what it smells like, what it feels like, and everybody who runs their mouth in those environments after those situations does not. So I avoid those people, and then I try to look at it from both sides of the house. I support gun legislation, but I also support the Second Amendment. And I spend a lot of time with myself thinking, base jumping is awesome, but most of base jumping is hiking. And I spend all of that time talking to myself or talking to people that I trust and have good relationships with, or just thinking about what it is that I truly believe. And I try to find, for me, it has the solution has to be reasonable. And I try to spend my time finding that reasonable ground, because I don't like extremists of any kind. I don't like extremists on the left, and I don't like extremists on the right. And what I really don't like is in situations like the Florida shooting, instead of talking about what I think the issues are that are causing those shootings, everybody immediately runs for a land grab, and it's either one side or the other, and they get entrenched and they won't give an inch. And so we get actually nowhere.
I love, of course, I'm assuming everybody knows who you are, who's certainly on my show, because we've got a lot of law enforcement, military, martial arts, combatives guys and stuff like that. We probably should have started with this, but our audience is growing. Why don't you, this will be like a complete non sequitur, but why don't you do like a 2-minute Reader's Digest for, update of who you are and what your background is. So, because I've got a lot of questions about the Second Amendment and violence and shit like that coming up.
I mean, I can do the Reader's Digest in 30 seconds. I grew up in a beach town in California, Santa Cruz in the Monterey Bay. I come from a military family on both sides of the house. My mom was a military brat. My dad and his dad before him all served in the Navy. I made the decision that I wanted to do that at a very early age. Specifically, I wanted to pursue becoming a SEAL. I did that right after leaving high school. And then for the next 17 years, I was headlong into that pursuit. 5 years into that career, we went from hypothetical to practical with 9/11 happening. Spent the rest of my career post 9/11 either deploying or a billet where I was actually putting people through BUDS training. Got medically retired, and since then, after medically retiring, kind of dove into the skydiving world and base jumping that you alluded to earlier. That was post-military that I was actually really able to do that. And yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
That was almost 30 seconds. That's amazing. Yeah. So let's jump in, because I got some base jumping skydiving questions, and I've got some violence stuff. And we had a really interesting talk when you had me on your show about that incident at the restaurant where you hung around. I'll give you 42 seconds on this one. Bring people up to speed on that, because my question is, how do we, like there are people, and you talk about like this polarization of people are the right or left or yes or no or right or wrong and all that. And one of the things that I always talk about is, how do you, again, be your own bodyguard? And more importantly, in this day and age, how do you decide whether or not you should be the courageous bystander? And a lot of that has to do with, you've seen violence, you've trained for it, you've had to insert yourself into it. And here, years after, you medically retired and you're doing your own thing, you found yourself in a restaurant looking at a hostile, you knew all the pre-contact cues and where it's going, but you could have very easily said, I'm out of here. I don't want the lawsuit. I don't want the media. I don't want to get involved, but you did get involved. And that thought process is, so my question is, do you think, how do we get inspired by that? And then in this day and age where we're so worried about litigation and bullshit, it's confusing to make the right decision for some.
I would say that there are some people who are confused, but making the right decision should never be confusing. Everybody knows the difference between right or wrong. It's like you can feel it and taste it at some points in your life. And to go back to that restaurant situation, I'm raising 3 kids who are under the age of 15 right now. And I constantly am telling them to do the right thing and to stand up for what they believe in. And I tell my sons when I drop them off at school, be a leader, not a follower. And it's not like I've been doing that for a year. I've been doing that for years, for as long as I can remember. And then I'm with my entire family in an environment where obviously something wrong is happening. Even my kids at a very young age, they were looking at what was going on, and you could tell just from the behavior and the reaction of the adults. Kids pick up an amazing amount of stuff. You know this as a parent. They hear more and they see more than you wish they ever did. It's being a parent it's a burden. It's an amazing burden that I wish people took more seriously. And I mean, literally in that moment, to me, it's not a matter of whether or not I'm going to get involved. Of course I'm going to get involved because something wrong is happening. There's a child involved that cannot stand up for themselves, and which is the reality of why I got involved. It's not like I give a shit about the guy or the gal. They could go get hit by oncoming traffic. I could give two shits, because life is about the choices that you make, and they're making their choices, and they need to be held responsible for those. The kid, on the other hand, though, can't stand up for themselves. And the rule with my sons is that if I ever hear that you're bullying somebody, I'm going to have your ass. But you're going to get in even more trouble if I ever hear that you didn't stand up for somebody who is getting bullied. So I'm sitting here at a table with my kids, and this is going down. And how can I tell them those things for year after year after year, and then not display exactly what it is that I'm talking about in that environment? And the truth is I don't like violence. I actually, at this point in time in my life, I don't want to be involved in it at all. I've seen more than some and less than others, and it's not like I'm going out looking for it. But with presented an opportunity to do the right thing or sit there like an asshole with my phone and film it like everybody else was doing, it's not a choice in my mind. You have to step up. You have to do the right thing. And to me, it's that example that's going to help start swinging the compass needle in the correct direction. I mean, the problems that we're facing as a society did not happen overnight. And it baffles me that people are looking for precise solutions to a broad problem. It took years for these problems to start rearing their head. Why people think they're going to go away with a changing of legislation is beyond me. There's a root problem that with that legislation, I think could be beneficial, but it's going to take just as much time, if not more, to correct the ship as it did to get it off course.
I like it. I agree. A couple of things, with that, my brain is like firing like 5 different questions. So which tangent should we go off on? Do you think, with respect to the courageous bystander and getting involved? I mean, this is kind of, I'm just talking like layperson talk, because I know the answer and I know the answer you think, but obviously the fact that you have been up close and personal with violence, and you're not afraid to fight. And I did air quotes there, even though this will be an audio show. There's always the adrenaline and the risk and the concern. And in the same way you've got a pre-jump ritual, you're not cavalier about jumping off the side of a mountain. But the fact that you've been stress inoculated to it, that allows you, specifically you, to go, I am going to get involved. And I know that there are, like I was in a situation in an airport many, many years ago, where I saw this abusive father, like just in his kid's face. And it was horrifying to me. And this is, I think it was years before cell phones and nobody was filming and all of that. But I was there, my heart was pounding and my adrenaline was going, and, I had a flight to catch. And I'm like thinking, I want to go over there and do what he's doing to this kid, to the father. And I'm really getting emotional and everything like this. And then I start talking to myself, and I'm wondering, like, how come, there's the gate agent there and nobody's doing anything. And I had this conversation that lasted about 30 seconds of, if I went in there and said, hey, in whatever way, asserted myself, that 30 minutes later, I'm on a flight somewhere else. He's on a different flight somewhere else. And that kid is going to possibly experience the wrath of me embarrassing his dad or asserting my dad. It was a really awkward, and I've never even talked about it. It just made me think about like where I knew I wanted to do something, but the convergence of all of where I was, how many people there were and all this, but where I ended up saying, and he wasn't doing anything like that. Was in your case there was actual physical risk,
Yep.
right? They were drunk and getting ready to leave and having a fight, and
Yep.
and it was like, I'm not letting these drunk idiots take this kid in a car and reading about it tomorrow. Like this was just like some passive aggressive, power tripping, abusive dad, and there was nothing physical going on. I was like, what an idiot, right? Just
Yep.
But how I gave myself permission to leave was I said, nothing I do is going to change this kid's life and this father like right now. And I actually thought that I might make it worse when this guy was alone with his kid. And maybe I was just being a pussy. But it was a whole bunch, like I really, like it felt like I was there for like an hour, but it was like minutes watching it. And then it was, and I guess I don't even know what I'm asking you, but it's that easy to, where it had maybe a social worker, and this is what I'm getting at. So let's say a social worker who had dealt with this sort of thing had like this, like all of these different strategies they've used to help diffuse parents, and they've done their scenarios with it. Maybe that person would have walked over and said, "Sir, can I ask you a question?" Whatever it is. I didn't have that skill set at the time, but I left, and I've always felt bad about it. And here I am 20 years later talking about it.
Yeah, maybe it could have made the kid's life worse because he would have had to deal with the repercussions, or maybe it would have been an opportunity to get that man to think about how shitty of an example that he was setting and potentially make him feel bad enough that he would change the trajectory of his life and therefore the life of the kid. I mean, so myself in that situation, as you're playing that out, I would have stepped in for sure, but it would have been as a totally non-aggressive, just as de-escalated as emotionally as possible, and try to get that individual to realize how much of an asshat that they are actually being in public, the example that they're setting for their kids. And to be honest, stepping in those environments is an example that everybody else around that individual who saw it and did nothing also needs to see. I almost think people feel like they're not empowered to do the right thing because, like you said, it's a litigious society, and we can go down that route forever, but that can paralyze people into not doing the right thing when they have the opportunity to do so. I think we need to highlight much more the examples of people doing the right thing instead of the tragedies that occur all over the place, not at a statistically higher level, but because we have so much access to information now, it seems like that's all that happens in the world. I really think that the beginning of the pendulum moving in the right direction is people taking action.
I agree. Many years ago and a couple of times since, I said, "Hey, why isn't there like a good news station that only reports good shit?" Like if
people pay attention to it. Think about this: the news stations, CNN, Fox News, ABC, NBC, they get paid. I mean, they make their money off the ad breaks, right? So they're basically selling soap. They get their ratings and therefore their mathematical formula to charge ad dollars off of the same ratings program that the Big Bang Theory does. So it's not really news. They're trying to get as many eyeballs as possible so they can sell ad dollars, just like Big Bang Theory, just like Friends or whatever show that you like to watch. You have to understand that they're all interconnected. So if you think you're going to watch Big Bang Theory and get the news, I should say, if you think you're going to watch Big Bang Theory and it's going to be a replication of modern society and you're going to get the news, you're as detached, in my opinion, as you are watching Fox News or CNN or whatever, thinking you're going to get the whole and complete story. They're just trying to grab you in so they can sell soap.
I dig it. Hey, back to the me not taking action, because it's obviously and I appreciate you telling me that I was a pussy in very eloquent terms. And I want to say something here, just because this show does get really honest to people listening, is you can't copy Andy and you can't copy Tony. You got to do you, and how you behave and how you move will be it will be in proportion to your experience and your confidence at that time in your life. And I just want to point out, like, while I was going, wow, shit, was I like acting very cowardly? Like, why didn't I move? And I grew up in I grew up in the 60s, and I grew up in a physically abusive environment. And while we were talking about that, because I can think of other times where I've physically inserted myself, like you did I mean, your event got physical, but I've inserted myself in confrontations using the exact emotional posture you described here about, like, non-confrontational. I've been in like a restaurant where a physical fight broke out with a 3-on-1 and diffused all 4 people by by, hey man, what's going on here? Like you got, there's families here, there's kids here. What are you doing? You know, like it, and totally diffuse the whole thing. And I've done that in other situations, but I didn't do this here. And part of it was like, yeah, I got to catch my flight. I'm moving. I'm watching this. Nobody else is doing something. Nothing's going to happen to this kid publicly because they're inside the airport. And if it escalated, somebody else. And I rationalized. But what I realized, if I can be honest with you and anyone and everyone listening here, is I was much more emotional in that situation because I saw me and the kid.
Yeah.
And I knew that, and this is about self-awareness, I think, and not rationalizing a little bit, is I knew I couldn't be cool because it was triggering like really emotional shit in me. Like I knew what that kid was going through. And I didn't trust myself to go up and go, hey man, come on. What kind of example are you setting? What's going on here? Right? Recognizing like, had I could have gone up to the guy and go, look, obviously your parents sucked and now you're sucking as a parent. So let's break that cycle here.
That would have been a solid opening. That would have probably elicited a physical response.
But dude, like I can do that now where my head was at,
there's a lot of variables, man. Like you know what I mean? You view the world, you're actually wearing glasses right now. Right. And
right.
The lens that you view the world through is a combination of all your experiences and your background. And I wouldn't say that environment is you not being a pussy. It was you recognizing that, you know, or rationalizing that you couldn't have made the difference that you wanted to make in that environment. Like, believe me, I'm sure there are many situations in my own life where I could have done something that I didn't because I was either didn't notice it was happening because I wasn't paying attention or situationally aware of everything that was going on. Or again, you know, say you had gotten physical, you would have missed your flight. There's a lot of other things that would have happened, and it's not all on you. I mean, how many other people were sitting there watching that were able-bodied who could have done exactly the same thing? It's a difference that we need to have in our society that is driven at the individual level, but hopefully aggregates up to a society-wide level. But I would not describe that situation as you being a pussy.
Yeah.
Probably recognizing that you wouldn't have had the impact that you wanted to have.
I was being a little self-deprecating there, but I just want people listening here just to remember and come back to, you know, whip around to this is, you know, you can't listen. You can be inspired by something somebody does or says, but you can't copy it.
You can, don't expect the same outcome.
Right. And so, and this is very subtle because we use our heroes, whether they're sports or whomever, you know, the military, law enforcement, we use people to inspire performance to go like it's the Roger Bannister effect. Nobody can run, you know, 4-minute miles. He does. And then within 2 weeks, everyone's breaking 4-minute miles. Right. And he just passed away recently. So hats off to Mr. Bannister. But the idea here is that, like there's a difference between, you know, emulating a training protocol and being inspired by somebody's, you know, focus and discipline and so on and so forth, and the copying stuff. And I just wanted to point out, like, just through that spontaneous introspection right here, that I recognized that I was really emotional watching that kid. And then I realized why, because of, you know, how I grew up. And now, you know, 20, 30 years after that incident, and I've got 3 grown kids and all that I have a different skill set that I would have handled it differently, almost like you had said, totally non-confrontational. Because there's a certain irony if you're screaming at your kids to stop screaming at their sister and brother, right? Like, stop screaming, right? And you go, people don't realize that they're screaming, right? You know, and how many parents do that?
Yeah, I mean, you know as well as I do that going into an emotionally charged situation when you're emotional yourself, especially if it could lead to violence, is not. Yeah, it's not a recipe for success. So again, I'll point back to you probably made the right call given where you were in that point in time, because it could have, because of where you were, gone to a place that it didn't need to go to.
Yeah. And that's what my intuition was telling me, that I'm going to go there and I'm going to get arrested, and this guy's going to, and then this this kid's going to go, where's my dad? But anyways, very interesting. Let's switch gears and talk about gun legislation.
Sure.
And your thoughts on that. And I wrote something for Medium after the blog site on gun control, and it was interesting. I had a really good, this guy from Australia kind of picked apart my article, like rejecting everything I said. And it was really cerebral and really well done, really made me think. But basically, because I teach empty hand skills and have for decades, I'm all for gun control. If you could somehow go back in time to the 1400s when they developed gunpowder and friggin', take that off, take that discovery away and get rid of guns. And now what would happen, we come back to your elevator concept, is like if someone had a problem with you, they couldn't, go get a legal or illegal gun and go shoot up a whole bunch of people from a distance. They would have to come up and, grab you by the throat. And how many people, if you had to choke people, could you kill in a mass attack, right? Maybe one, maybe two. So I said, I don't, like, if you took all the guns away, I'd be okay. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on the chaos of this?
Man, it's an onion. I mean, there's so many layers to it. I almost always come back to, on my thoughts or my beliefs, that it has to meet two criteria. It has to be practical and it has to be reasonable. Guns scare the shit out of people, and I understand why. They contain, as an object, an amazing amount of kinetic energy and potential. They can take life indiscriminately, but not by themselves. If you buy a gun and you put it on your table for 30 years, it's not going to kill anybody. So that kinetic energy and that potential has to be harnessed by somebody. And that's where things start getting a little bit weird, because the person whose hand picks up a weapon could use it to lay down their life in the defense of others, or they could use it as the tool that allows them to exponentially increase their own internal hatred or pain or suffering. I mean, I truly, at a baseline level, do not understand how somebody could get to a point where they think that going into a high school and shooting people is, I don't want to say a solution, but it's even something that you would even consider. Like, my brain just doesn't work like that. Right. But unfortunately, there are people, and I believe that they are the vast, vast statistical minority, that brains do work like that. And in those environments, guns in the hands of those people are incredibly dangerous things. Now, when it comes to gun legislation, I wrote a blog after the Vegas shooting, or maybe it would have been on the podcast, but I was talking about, automatic fire is one example of legislation that I think is both practical and reasonable. For home defense or for hunting or even collecting, there's really no argument for automatic weapons fire. If you're firing full auto inside of your house to try to protect yourself, you're a complete asshole. Because for one, you can't hit anything if it's beyond 5 yards away. You might with the first round, but you're probably going to hit your family with the remaining 7. Hunting, go ahead. Show me how you hunt with fully automatic fire. And on the issue of, well, I want to have it because I'm a collector. Well, you know what? I'm sorry. Your desire to collect that firearm, I think, is outweighed by the potential threat. And I'll use Vegas as an example. Although he didn't have an automatic weapon, he had a piece of equipment that basically simulated automatic fire, right? The bump stock, which if you research into the bump stock and how it was created and the terminology used to describe it and why it even became into existence, is a little bit ridiculous. And essentially what it does is it takes a non-automatic weapon and it replicates automatic weapons fire. And in a firearm, the semi and safe and the allowing of the firing pin to go forward is controlled by the sear, and it's deep inside the trigger mechanism. And on a fully automatic weapon, it basically allows the pin to continue to fire without catching it. Now, all they did with the bump stock is they moved that function of the sear into the receiver that goes into your shoulder, and then you hold your finger there, and it basically replicates the same thing. So it was a legal way of getting around the fully automatic fire. And what it allowed an individual to do from an elevated position, people are like, oh, he was a trained marksman. No, he was a guy in an elevated position with a lot of bullets firing down into fish in a barrel that had restricted exit points. The dude couldn't miss. Like, oh, it was a crazy shot. Like, there's like 300 yards. I mean, literally just put your sights somewhere near a crowd and pull the trigger. There's no reason that somebody should have the ability to cause that much damage. And I guarantee you, none of the police officers that were responding, if they had fully automatic capable weapons, I guarantee you, none of them had their weapon on full auto. Why? Because it's not effective. It's good for machine guns in a military setting because you're trying to suppress fire, gain fire superiority, and get people's head down when you're trying to maneuver. But that's in war. That's not happening in the streets of LA. That's not happening in the streets of Vegas. And even if they had machine guns, if they had a 50 cal, the cops had one, they're not going to shoot it at that hotel that the guy was shooting from. So I don't think that there's a reason for civilians to have that type of weapon. When it comes to the ability to buy a gun, should it be 18 or 21? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I was 17 years old when I made the decision to join the military, and, I had to wait until I was 18 to enlist. But why am I old enough to enlist in the military and potentially give my life for my country, but not own a firearm at the age of 18? Now, in the Constitution, it doesn't say anything about age of owning a gun. It just says the right to bear arms, right? And that the majority age is set by states. And to get back to my point where people are entrenched, the NRA just sued Florida because they're trying to raise the age of purchasing a weapon to 21. And people are saying it's a violation of their constitutional rights. And my response is, show me in the Constitution where it says you have to be 18 or 21 to purchase a firearm. Now, and again, is that a reasonable and practical piece of legislation? Yes, it is, but it's also not going to change anything because you have to come back to the realization that laws and regulations are only as applicable as the civilian populace that follows them. So if you have people who don't care about the law, it doesn't matter what you have on the books. They'll find an illicit way to source it. Will that make it more difficult? I hope so. But does that really stop the person who has screws loose in their head, who thinks that, Iron Man told them that they need to go, fucking Batman told them they need to go to Colorado and shoot up a movie theater. And then when he gets arrested, he tells the police he's the Joker. There's no law that's going to stop that. There's no legislation that's going to stop that. So, I mean, I support the Second Amendment. I think we should have the right to bear arms, but let's just be reasonable and practical with how we're approaching it. So I don't even know if I answered your question. I just rambled for a few minutes.
It's good. It's good. It's good stuff. Specifically, people arguing about the AR and the pistols and the knife, and those are the things where people go like, if he had a knife, he'd have done less damage, and then someone will come back and go, well, then he would just use a truck, and then he would just use a bomb.
Well, that goes back to the reasonable and practical, right? So we just need to get rid of all guns. That's not happening in the U.S. I mean, there are more guns than human beings, so that fails my litmus test of a practical solution of what we're going to do to this problem. You're not going to have the police go door to door knocking on people's doors saying, hey, give me your guns. And again, let's say that most people were willing to give up their guns, because I think that most people would say, if there's never another murder in this country of an innocent child at a school, yes, I'm willing to give you let's just say assault rifle. I'm willing to give you my assault rifle. There's a lot of people who'd be willing to do that. And then there's people who don't give a fuck. So then you have the people who don't give a fuck who are going to keep their ARs, and the people who do care are going to give them away. Now you've armed a group of people and disarmed a group of people. You know what I mean? Now the scales have tipped even further in the wrong direction. And I'm not saying that there's necessarily a solution there, but it's something that should be discussed.
Right. And what do you think about the just because this is just such an important and timely topic, the whole arming teachers or guards. And, I had, right after the event, I had 4 active duty police officers on the podcast just to discuss training and tactics and thoughts like that. And one of the guys, I've known him for years, lives in Canada now, but he's Israeli and was in the army there. And he says like every school there is surrounded by, walls and barbed wire and has armed guards. You don't, and then people here are like, I don't want to send my kid to school knowing that, there's a teacher with a gun there. That's not the environment and all of that. I mean, do you have any, as a dad, parent?
Well, I think Israel is an example of that working because of the environment that they are living in. And let's be honest, Israel and Florida are not the same. Right. The population, the size, the breadth and depth. And Israel is facing a real terror/terrorist issue every single day. The schools throughout our country are not. And I don't know how many schools there are in Israel, but I bet you there's more in Florida than there are in the country of Israel. So although it may work, and again, practical and reasonable, is it practical to think that we can replicate that system throughout the U.S.? Absolutely not. And as far as arming teachers, I think it's one of the worst ideas that I've ever heard. You want to talk about liability and litigious society? Who's going to be on the hook if a teacher has an AD in the classroom and accidentally shoots a kid? And let's be really clear about this too. The person in Parkland was a student of that school previously and was shooting at kids and potentially teachers that they may have known. People think, and they look at environments like that and they're like, I would have rushed in there and I would have shot him. Well, shut your fucking mouth, because one, you've never been in a situation like that. And two, let's add the fact that you're supposed to be a teacher. You need to take care of your students. Then you're going to pull out your pistol probably, because I doubt they're going to be rolling around with long guns in there. And you're telling me that you are going to be in that environment when somebody's rolling down a hallway shooting. You're going to be able to shoot at and kill somebody that you may have known. Maybe you had a good relationship with that student. I mean, there's a personal aspect that goes along with that as well, in addition to the fact that, I want my teachers to teach, not have to worry about their currency on the range. And currency on the range has absolutely nothing to do with your ability to take a life in a dynamic environment. Maybe it's low light. Who knows what's going to be going on in that environment, but it's totally different than taking a gun out of a plastic case on a range and you lay your gun out and you lay your magazine out, you load it, and a paper target goes out to 5 yards and you shoot at it a few times. That is not the way it is in real life. And arming individuals whose primary responsibility is to educate our youth, and then layering on top of that, thinking that they're going to all of a sudden pull out their Captain America shield in the moments that happen. Maybe some of them would, but I truly believe that the vast majority of them will not be able to. And I think there's more risk having them armed than looking for other solutions that may have more impact.
I dig it. Philosophically, I agree. There are some, you look at, let's say, the story of the phys ed teacher who got in front and shielded, I go, well, had he had a gun on him right there, he probably would have shot the guy. There are people who,
unless he sucked at shooting,
right?
Unless he had never, again, lining your sights up on paper, it's easy. Lining your sights up on a human being, maybe one that maybe he was in his PE class 2 years before. There is more to that equation than people are giving it the gravity that it really requires.
Yeah, and for people who aren't tracking what Andy's talking about, is something that in our courses we talk about the change that happens when you know who somebody is, because most people don't realize that most crimes, rape, murder are committed by people you know. They're not specters in the dark. They're not. And so we practice hitting a heavy bag. We practice focus pads. We hit things. We yell. We key eye. We do all this stuff. But most like mass murders, not active killer situation, mass murders are committed by family members to their family members. And so that moment where one of the things that we would ask in our class, I go, hey, if your mom walked into the room with a knife or an axe or a gun or a baseball bat, what would you do? And like the look of horror on my students' faces are like, I go, listen, if my mother ever walked into my room and she had an axe in her hand, and I've thought about this deeply I've been teaching this principle for 30 years, Andy. It's kind of interesting that you bring it up. I go, we better be in the fucking country and the words coming out of her mouth better be, hey, go start the fire. Here's an axe. Like, there better be something congruent with the weapon.
Yeah.
We're in the woods and there's wood and a fire and we're barbecue, whatever it is. And people look at me and I go, how many of you could like drop your mother, drop your father? And they're like, I go, the hesitation right here is amplified tenfold when it's real. This is just theoretical. You're sitting in a classroom. So when you know somebody, that changes anything. That's a deep and subtle reality people don't appreciate or build into their training.
Again, it's people are looking for a precise solution to a broad issue. Arm the teachers. That's not going to fucking solve the problem.
Right.
Is it going to be a deterrent? I don't know. Honestly, I don't think so. Because again, the person whose brain is wired to think that their only course of action in life is to go make as many other people suffer in the way that they feel they're suffering, I don't know if that deters them. I really don't.
Right. If they want to be famous and they're going to find another way and they're going to maybe redirect or go after that person directly or whatever. I mean, this is all speculation. Let's talk about, and I try to keep these around an hour. People tell me even that's too long. Someone told me the other day I was at a little get together.
Not everybody should have a voice, Tony. We already covered.
This is true. We're going to talk for hours today. My hard drive's going to
man, I don't care.
Let's talk about fear.
Sure.
Because this is the No Fear podcast. And it's a subject that's near and dear to my heart, but it's also something that this is one of the things that I've always respected about you, and even the way you carry yourself. There's a lot of people who are in the communities that you share relationships with, and there's like this macho, hey, I'm badass, BAMF, right? The badass motherfucker vibe and all that. And you've always been humble and quiet and mindful and respectful, and especially, both when you talk, when you write, when you're doing your podcast. And one of the things that I always appreciated was, I've told this story on a couple of podcasts where, I've got this fear of heights, and I've always had. I don't like being up really high, and so as part of my research to understand fear and breathing and mindset and stuff, I jumped out of an airplane on purpose twice. Once was a static line. I make the joke that I passed out jumping out, so I didn't remember it, so I had to do it again. And people were like, "Really, seriously?" I go, "No," but like that was so fast, and I felt like that wasn't really skydiving. That was just jumping out of an airplane. So then I went and I decided. It was actually after watching the original Point Break. I was sitting there going, if that's what skydiving looks like, I got to try this, but I'm too scared.
Fly like an eagle, Johnny.
Yeah. And dude, so I went and I did a tandem jump up in Snohomish, Washington. And it was insane. And I did it like really visualizing that this wasn't going to work out. I wanted to understand what was going to happen to my brain, my heart rate. And that's all I was thinking about. Okay. I don't have a parachute. He does. And I went and I did it. And a couple of years later, and I became, a fairly well known for my focus on managing fear and understanding fear throughout all our training. So it was, even though I could be like, we were down at Fort Bragg and I'm there to do our confined space combatives course, but I'm there a couple of days early. We're meeting at a coffee shop, and one of the guys says, hey, we're going jumping later. Do you want to come? I said, no, I'm good. And he smiled and went, come on, man, Mr. Fear Management, let's go. I go, no, I'm good. Like, I've done it twice on purpose. I know I could do it. He said, yeah, I thought you were like, you could manage, like you're the fear guy. I go, yeah, I'm managing my fear by not doing it. But I also, right? but I also managed my fear by actually doing it. And I said, you don't have any fear? He says, man, I love to jump. I go anytime I can. And I said to him, so let me pack your chute for you today. And he went, fuck you, right? And I went, there's fear for you. A lot of it is semantics for people, right? So depending if you're really type A or whatever, you talk, like every fighter I know has a pre-fight ritual. And it could be their lucky rabbit. It could be their socks. It could be the way they tie their shoes. That's fear. If you peel that onion deeply, it's a type of fear. If I change your ritual, it changes your state, changes your physiology. So I just wanted to preamble that, because what I loved, for those of you who haven't seen what Andy does now in this chapter of his life, is he jumps off of fucking giant rocks and flies like it's just insane. Like, sometimes what I do is, like, I hide under my covers while I watch your videos. And I should explain, like, this is not like, you also do porn, but I haven't seen any of those.
I also have my clothes on in these videos.
Right. So right. And I have my clothes on. I have my socks on when I'm in bed watching you. But talk to me about that, because that's the most fascinating thing, is that you do this on a regular basis. And what are your thoughts on fear, and any how you manage that and deal with that?
I mean, my thoughts on fear in general, I hope that everyone realizes that there are two types of people. There are the type of people that experience fear, and then there are the type of people who talk about themselves being fearless. And that second category of people are known as liars. It's a universal, what would it be? An emotion, a reaction, whatever it may be, a mixture of the two. But I mean, at its essence, what is it? It's your body trying to tell you, like, hey, pay attention. Something dangerous is happening. And when you're younger, I remember being scared of the dark, because I didn't have any experience, and I thought that the monsters were in the dark. And I remember the racing of the heart rate. And I used to run up this set of stairs. We lived in Montana when I was really young. And we had a set of stairs that would go upstairs, and it made like a left-hand turn. There was basically like a T at the bottom, and on the other side was a storage area that was dark, and it was like the demon that I knew was going to get me. And I remember to this day that feeling when I knew I had to go upstairs. I would always sprint, and I would always think that there was something coming up, behind me. And now I look back, and I'm like, how ridiculous was that? But I remember, before we left, I remember having the conversation with myself, like, I'm done running up this set of stairs. I'm going to walk up this set of stairs. And if the monster eats me, then God damn it, I was meant to be eaten by a monster. And, I was scared of the ocean the first time that I swam in it. And then I did junior lifeguards and got enough experience in the ocean that I became comfortable. I never lost my respect for it, but I became comfortable operating in that environment. The fear was always still there, because I've been caught in riptides and I've been caught in surf that was way over my head, like my ability to handle. And it scares the crap out of you, because, again, it's that feeling like, oh my God, I'm going to die. In the military, the same thing. Getting shot at is not awesome. Sitting there being unable to move while your buddies are getting shot at is worse than getting shot at. And it's a motivator and a driver. And at the end of the day, I would say my baseline motivation in the military was the absolute desire to not let the people down that were around me. And to get to that point where you're able to do that, you have to live in an environment where you're scared. You're scared of not being able to shoot good enough, not being able to jump good enough, not being able to perform. And you get that experience, and you learn that fear is totally natural. Everybody, every single person experiences fear. But what they do with that fear is the variable in my experience. Some people are very paralyzed by it. Some people allow it to be the barriers of their life. Like, they will not do things that scare them. So although those barriers are invisible, it definitely governs the direction of their life. And then there's the way that I look at it, where it's to get to the base jumping side of the house. I'm scared every single time that I put my feet on the edge of a cliff, and I'm zipped up in this ridiculous nylon suit that I wish I could say it flies. At best, it glides, but you're falling out of the sky. The jump is 100% optional. Everything that happens after you leap off that cliff is 100% mandatory. And it's scary because I know people who have died. I've watched people die doing it, and I don't want to die. And it's resting heart rate when I'm standing there zipped up, easily 150, dry mouth. You'll see me in the videos. I'm like shuffling back and forth, going through my pre-jump ritual. I'm touching the same things over and over again until I can pack my mind into a place where I'm ready to take that leap and deal with what comes after it. Because fear, I don't think, should barrier or boundary your behavior. I think you should learn how to operate inside of those mechanisms. It's a warning that, hey, something really important or something really dangerous right now is about to happen. And I think that's good. I think that's where the most rewarding things in life happen, is when you chase that fear, not doing irrational or irresponsible things. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm not saying people should go base jump. I'm saying that if something scares you, like I've stood in front of barbells and literally felt scared because of the workout I knew that I was getting ready to do, because I knew it was going to hurt. And that's how I knew I was doing the right workout. If I stood there and I was like, whatever, this is going to be a piece of cake, I'm not training at the level that I need to be training at. So I think people should seek fear in a reasonable and controlled environment to start inoculating themselves to what it's going to feel like. And, use it as a reminder, not a governor on your life.
I dig that. Very nice. I don't know that I've ever heard this term before, and a buddy of mine used it in some social media post. Time under tension. Have you heard that?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, I had heard it, but I'd never thought about it, and it's a nice reframe of this. It's like, how's a diamond formed, right? It's
that's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah, and it became, it was kind of that, like, just popped up again recently, and it was interesting how I looked at the last 30, 40 years of my progression and journey, where I realized, like, the best things that evolved out of that were almost always created by some of the near catastrophes in business and in life, where you discover resiliency, and you discover how you're going to look at fear and handle stuff, and it impacts every part of you. And what I got listening to you talk about, fear in general, and the application, the example of base jumping is that you need to reframe fear. And again, not be cavalier about it. And there are those people out there that going, man, let's do something like the adrenaline junkie. And that's a dangerous thing, because now you're possibly rushing and a little careless with your.
That'll meet its natural end. I mean, the people who look at it like that, or take what I was saying in that manner, they will meet the natural Darwinian end to what they choose to do, because that's not what I'm saying. It's and I hope people don't take it like that. But I agree, reframing it, I think, is a great idea.
Yeah. And those of you who listen to this podcast before know that I force feed this to everybody, is that, fear can be, learning to look at fear and getting to know fear, KNOW fear, can be cathartic. And its alternative is that, as Andy says, it stymies your growth. It redirects you from things. And you use the term take a knee before, metaphorically being, hey, I'm going to gather all this information. And that's really what he's saying, is that if you're afraid of public speaking, or you're afraid to say this to your wife or say this to your kid, or what, that you need to look at that and go, like, that is the door I need to go through. But you should and can take a knee and gather as much information. And then you make your move. And courage and fear management is quite literally, I get asked this a lot, and I go, it's like any other muscle, like, in the sense that you get better at the delay between stimulus and response gets shorter and shorter and more focused as you continue to train it and seek it in a positive way, where you go, okay, like, I need to manage my fear here. And it's literally like life presents you with shit every single day, and therefore every week, where you can exercise courage and the ability to manage fear. It doesn't have to be a violent encounter or jumping off a cliff.
Dude, I couldn't agree more. One of the things I always try to reinforce to people is, like, if there was one change that I would love to see, is that people seek in themselves to be the example instead of looking for somebody else to set it. Like life, I mean, you're going to have choices all throughout your day, and they could be the most mundane, simple thing, where it be, what would be a good example that happens in my house all the time? The toilet paper roll runs out, and so my kids will just go get a brand new one, and they'll put it on top of the toilet paper roll that is sitting there, right? So you have choices, and that choice right there seems crazy, just innocuous, totally meaningless. But every choice you have is going to have an easy path and a hard path. The hard path is take the cardboard roll off, throw it in the garbage, put the new one on, and go on with your day. The easy path is to be lazy and put it on top. If you consistently take the easy path, that's the time under tension that your body is developing. You're seeking the easy way out. Whereas I literally will have conversations with myself. I'm like, okay, what do I need to do today? Or what is it that I want to accomplish today? And there's the easy route, put it off, do something else. And then there's the hard route where I'm actually going to have to work or reflect or put the time in and get to where it is that I want to be. I always try to take the harder route because that to me is where all the benefit and the growth is. And I try to reinforce that with my kids as well too. And those small decisions that seem like they're not violent confrontations, it has nothing to do with violence, but it starts, in my opinion, training you to seek the adversity, which is where the growth comes from, as opposed to seeking the comfort, which is where becoming an asshole on social media comes from. That's where I think, again, the small steps can lead to something great. Not overnight, but it's that time under tension and that repetition of what it is that you're looking to try to accomplish.
I love it. Dude, I have to wrap the show, but you'll be on again.
Okay.
For people who don't know where to follow you and learn more about you, can you share some places?
Just go to Google and put my name in.
Right. That's what I tell people, just Google. Really? You don't know how to Google?
I have all the same social media that everybody else does, and it's all a variation of my name. Yeah. I mean,
if you guys haven't listened to Andy's podcast, check that out. You got a specific page for the podcast though.
I do. So the podcast is called Cleared Hot, which you can find in all the same places you can find any podcast. Much like you have to find a site to host it. So
right.
Mine was on SoundCloud. I don't know how I settled on that, but if you go to clearedhotpodcast.com, that's the actual page for the podcast. But if you want to listen to it, just go to iTunes or Stitcher.
Google anywhere. Yeah. And you're going to start writing more?
I'm going to. I actually really miss it. For me, it's an exercise because I write a ton. And then I go and I try to remove as many words as possible. So I try to get more clear and concise in how I present my thoughts. It's a great exercise for me. The podcast largely fills some of that niche, but I just think that the writing medium for me is still something that I want to do. So it'll be making a return shortly.
Good. And I love the title of you still the same title for your?
Yeah. Confessions of an Idiot.
Confessions of an Idiot. I love it. So guys, if you're listening to this, go check out some amazing articles on Confessions of an Idiot, some great interviews on the Cleared Hot, and follow Andy on Facebook. And dude, we will have you back on the show many times.
Cool. Yeah. Anytime that you can fit me in your ridiculously busy schedule.
Yeah. Okay, man. Dude, I love you.
Super gay, but okay.
Hey, can you say that now?
I don't know.
This is too late. It's
the
up
internet.
There.
Internet.
I'm sure we'll get some negative marks against us for that closing comment. I thought maybe you'd say
it should be negative marks against me. That's not against you. I said that. Andy said that, not Tony.
Right. I just thought you were gender fluid, so I don't know.
I don't even know what that means.
I don't know what it means either. But some crazy shit going on the planet, and hopefully the pendulum will swing, and guys like you are inspiring us all. Andy, thank you so much for everything you do, and we will see you soon.
Right on, man. Thanks for having me.